This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Beachfront hotel development, impressive medical technology, and a love affair with aviation. Julian MacQueen, the Chief Executive Officer of Innisfree Hotels, on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us. We welcome to our show Julian MacQueen. And here we are in a very challenging environment, and you are building like crazy. You've got a big development underway in Orange Beach. You're building Holiday Inn on Pensacola Beach. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm looking out 2 or 3 years from now. When you build a hotel, you open the doors and you throw away the key. Then you sign a mortgage for 20 or 30 years. And like everything else, there's cycles. And right now we're hitting the very bottom of the cycle for hotel profitability and hotel development. And if you're lucky enough and blessed enough to have the wherewithal to get financing for a job, for a deal, you couldn't find any better pricing to build a hotel. And so with a 1.5 to 2 year cycle of building, we'll come out of this in our predictions right at the crest of the wave. We'll hit this upturn in the hotel sector and benefit from it because we were able to get a job done today.
You hit on something. You said if you're lucky enough, and the key there is getting financing, and that's something a lot of folks are having trouble with right now. What's your key?
I feel like a little schizophrenic sometimes because I sit on the board at Beach Community Bank, and we're looking at our balance sheet and trying to figure out how to conserve capital and being very judicious about who we loan to. And so on the one hand, I'm trying to be a good steward of that and good steward of the stockholders, but on the other hand, I'm a developer and I'm looking for money and I'm looking for capital, and I'm wondering why the banks don't loosen up. So I have these conversations with myself and wonder, which hat I'm holding on to at the time.
Do you see the banks, though, across the nation starting to loosen up a little bit?
There's, I think, going to be a tremendous fallout in the fourth quarter of this year. I think all the banks, particularly community banks that are on the edge, are probably going to fall off. I think, in my opinion, most of the banks have realized most of their losses and set aside their loan loss reserves. I think we are at a bottom. And, like everybody said, the stock market leads the recovery, and the stock market has shown that it's made a significant comeback. Mm-hmm. So the rest follows. You go into the commercial sector, and then re-employment follows after that. So I think we're there.
Speaking of the commercial sector, there has been some talk here recently about some of the challenges, particularly in the larger cities, New York and places like that, with vacancies rising mm-hmm. and downward pressure on rents. Do you see that as just a short-term issue?
I do. I think it's a cycle. I was actually working with my daughter who just moved to New York City, and we looked at apartments that were for sale, and we're looking for apartments that were for rent. And talking to the realtors up there, they're down about 25% mm-hmm. over the whole island of Manhattan, and which is very much in line with the rest of the nation. So, in their opinion, they're at a rocky bottom, just like I think we're at a more firm bottom here in this little part of our world, and it's a pretty solid bottom. And I see first quarter of 2010 coming mm-hmm. out mm-hmm. quite nicely.
Could this recession have been a little bit of a benefit to you in the Gulf Coast, because you had folks who maybe didn't, or ordinarily they might have taken a trip to Hawaii, but they decided to stay a little closer to home?
Well, there's a lot of factors like that, and it's a great point because the dollar is weak. Mm-hmm. Mexico is not a favorite place to go these days. The price of fuel is in our favor. The economy being weak means people are looking for something that's more economical, and we have a reputation here, and it's well earned, of being a very price sensitive, high value for low cost vacation experience. And since we are in a 1 hour's or 1 day's drive from I think it's something like 44 million people, we actually had a very positive summer, and in some months we exceeded months that we had over the last 12 years. So it's the same kind of thing that we saw after 9/11. We had double-digit increases here in our area, but the rest of the sector, the whole hospitality sector, took 20 and 30% nosedives, and we're down about for the year we're down about 4%. So
not bad.
In
all
this
things
economy,
considered.
that's a success.
How many properties do you own along the Gulf Coast here?
We have right around 1,000 rooms, and it's evenly divided between Orange Beach and Pensacola Beach.
Have you seen one area having more advantage over the other? I mean, has Orange Beach done better than, say, Pensacola, or
Well,
vice versa?
the marketing budget for Orange Beach and Gulf Shores is 3 times what it is for Pensacola. At the same time, they have 3 times the number of rooms to fill.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw them both come up basically the same, and in some areas we're better suited or had better increases in Pensacola Beach, say in the group market.
Mm-hmm.
We had better experience in the group market than we did in Orange Beach, but Orange Beach had a better just transient market business, and again, you get down into the details of it. You start looking at the different franchises and how they drive business. But basically, very, very much the same. Just came in different ways.
Big talk in Northwest Florida right now is the possibility of somebody landing what has been the elusive Southwest Airlines. Now, you've put your money where your mouth is,
Right.
and by committing some rooms, what's the story there?
Well, we look at this as a game-changing event. Most people that were here during the AirTran effort saw what happened to prices overall for Pensacola once we landed AirTran. And this, to me, is 10 times the opportunity. If we have the opportunity of getting Southwest Airlines here, this opens up the whole West Coast, everything west of us, and then brings us into some markets like Birmingham and Jackson, Mississippi, and a lot of these major feeder cities for Pensacola that we've never had a chance to get before. We came up with a commitment of 75,000 room nights. And if we did the math on it and took an average rate, it's a little over $6 million in contribution that Innisfree Hotels is making between our hotels in Orange Beach and here in Pensacola. And that sounds like a tremendous contribution, and it is. Mm-hmm. And but it's the kind of risk that I think needs to be taken in order to make a big impression on Southwest, letting them know that we are committed to them coming. We want to be team players. We want to generate revenue for them so that they'll generate revenue for us. And what's different about Southwest Airlines than some of the other carriers is 85% of their passengers are tourists. Mm. And that's truly unique. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we also expect to get a huge reward for taking the risk.
What will they do with those rooms? I mean, how will they utilize them?
They'll use them to package with. Turns out that Southwest Airlines is in the top 5 booking engines for vacations, and of all the booking engines. So when you take Google and Orbitz and Travelocity and the other major booking engines, this airline is in the top 5. Wow. So if you can get their attention and have them start throwing business into Pensacola and using that portal to attract markets that we've never hit before, it's huge. It's all incremental income. That's income that we had never had before.
You talk about them being huge on the tourist side of
Mm-hmm.
things. How might that help us, though, as far as the business side of things? I mean, obviously tourists come in are going to help the area, but as far as possibly bringing larger businesses into this area by giving us more exposure, is that possible?
It is absolutely a formula for success. And if you want to get grandiose, you can look and see what Delta did for Atlanta. Mm-hmm. That was the difference. And I remember at the time, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and I remember at the time when Delta was looking at either Birmingham or Atlanta. And, because of a lot of factors, they chose Atlanta. And look what happened to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Now, scale it down to our scalability, and I think that's the kind of effect we'll have here. All these tourists all work somewhere. They'll bring their meetings here. They'll start looking at us as a potential place for expanding their businesses, and it all follows that. It's a tremendous opportunity.
I've always believed that if people spent a little bit of time in Northwest Florida or South Alabama, they would fall in love with it. And I guess that's kind of a way to try to get that exposure.
You know, I travel a lot all over the world, and when I mention this part, the northwest part of Florida, truly no one knows that we're here. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we still haven't begin to get our location out there. No one understands what we have here, and once they see it for the first time, they love it. They love our southern hospitality, the gentility of our culture, the fact that we have this experience that's entirely different from the rest of Florida that they've seen, and they come back.
Do you think we're also at an advantage now because of technology? In other words, you don't necessarily have to be in a large city to do some of the things that maybe 25 years ago you needed the assets of a large city. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would actually. I mean, everybody is in charge of their own travel habits now. I mean, you don't call a travel agent anymore to go book anything. You go right online and do it yourself. And that, again, opens up all these portals that were never available to us in the past. And I think that's the entree into our market that's gonna allow me to make these huge capital commitments in what seems to be terribly down market. You know, those are the kind of things that I rely on to give us the impetus to move on.
How much money are you going to be putting into this Northwest Florida, South Alabama corridor here over the next few years as far as building? And
in Pensacola, we're putting in about $50 million on the beach, and then over in Orange Beach, we're putting in around $35 million. So $85 million in total. And you know, if you go and you talk to the Haas Center and look at the first dollar and second dollar and third dollar spent, it's easily you can easily double that on how the economy is affected by something like that. So we're seeing, you know, we're hoping to make a difference in that respect.
You're clearly bullish on this area, and I know you're also involved in building a hotel at Pensacola Regional Airport.
Yes.
What's the status on that at this stage in the game?
Right now, the project is frozen because some local developers have sued the city to keep the city from going forward with the process. So it's frozen for now. I'm hoping that it'll go through the system in the next year or two. But you know, attorneys love to play in that backyard, and everybody's having a great time. You know, looking at the details and slicing and dicing it and trying to find flaws in it so that they can stop the development. My hope is that the economics and the momentum of it will carry it through, because the rules that were given to us, we followed. No one's been able to find any fault in that. And hopefully the people that are against, you know, economic development at the airport will back off and see the greater benefit of it.
Now, speaking of the airport, I know you're an avid flyer, and,
Yes.
and you, once again, extending your entrepreneurial businesses out past the hotels, had built a jet center a while back. How's that going in this environment?
The Innisfree Jet Center has been a challenge because, you know, private jets are all of a sudden politically incorrect.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
So in a sense, you know, it's not good timing for that. But again, these are cycles, and thank goodness we have the staying power to ride it out. But actually, we're almost full. We've got rooms for maybe two more jets in the hangar for local jets, and people are discovering our facilities there. We're getting lots of catering events there because of we have a gourmet chef there at the Innisfree Jet Center, and it's a very unique setting for anyone to come in and use.
There was a lot of talk here a couple of years ago about, you know, some of the small jets, and that it would become almost, you know, kind of taxi cabs in the air.
Right.
And that business has been at a real, well, say the least challenging for the past couple of years. Moving forward, do you think it will get better? Is that going to come back, or?
You know, there's still some big players in it. Honda Jet, you know, is sitting there with a beautiful jet that they've come up with that should. They're tooling up in Greensboro, North Carolina, to start producing that. And there's a Phenom 100 jet that's having a great success. It's very efficient, using a composite construction. And Cessna's come out with a nice small jet it's a Mustang jet, and it's getting some play. Everything is really sitting kind of waiting for this recovery to happen. Right. And you know, I think those that have the staying power are going to come out on the other side stronger, and more sustainable. And I think these jets they have a place in the market. The ones that we've been working with over the last 20 or 30 years are the same. You know, there are 30-year-old airplanes that are the same small jets that we've been using for the last while, and they're very inefficient. So these new jets have new technology, new engines that burn literally one third of the fuel that these other typical jets have been burning, and these other jets are about 2/3 of the price of the old one. So it's a win-win. I think this is the new wave, and it'll come back once the rest of the economy comes.
You know, there's been bad press around the private jets, you know, with the auto guys flying into Washington and stuff like that. But as a business person, and I don't want to beat this too much, but I think it's worth making a point, and you tell me if I'm on the right track. I mean, your time's worth a whole lot. I mean,
Exactly.
maybe it is cheaper sometime. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, you know, if you put 2 or 3 executives or 3 or 4 executives on a trip to Atlanta, you're there in 57 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You get your business done and you're back. And, you know, that the downtime, the literal time that you're traveling is cut down to 57 minutes versus, you know, whatever it takes you to get there an hour beforehand and go through luggage check and security and then get a cab and all the things that goes with commercial aviation. It's a huge waste of time. So I call private jets time machines.
Mm-hmm.
You can be in Miami in an hour and 24 minutes, do a lunch and then come back. We had a client last week use one of our wet leases for our airplane. We have a Citation II that we're selling wet leases on. He was down there and back, and he had a 2 o'clock meeting here. He was down there for lunch with the governor, and it was very important for him to be, very efficient, and he was, and he got a lot more business done that day than probably everybody else at the meeting.
So really more of a business tool than a flamboyant extravagance.
It's a great tool. It's a great tool.
Let's shift out of real estate and talk for a second about medical technology. You're involved with a company called WeCab.
Right.
What is it?
WeCab is a medical technology that I was introduced through IHMC when Ken Ford introduced me to Dr. Paul Baccarita, who is this genius scientist out of Madison, Wisconsin, that came up with the concept of brain plasticity. And the concept basically is that if areas of the brain are damaged, then other areas will compensate for it. So he took that concept and then said, well, if that's true, then perhaps you could also compensate for different portals to the brain. So he came up with this device called a brain port. And what it is, it's they call it a lollipop that basically you stick on your tongue. It has a wire coming out, and you can hook it up to one of 2 devices. One device allows your tongue to substitute for balance, and this device trains you in 2 or 3 20-minute sessions to recover your balance if you've had some kind of brain damage or if you've had a stroke or Parkinson's or anything like that. You can actually train yourself to rebalance and take it out, and the residual effect is still there. We have on our website, you can go to it. It's WeCab. It's WICAB.com, and you can go there and you can look at the videos. The other part is the one that's really fascinating, gotten a lot of attention, is allowing people to see with their tongue. Mm. And you say that on the first blush, and people go, "That's just hard to take in." But
right.
what most people don't think through is that you don't see with your eyes; you see with your brain. And if you can emulate those electrical signals with a camera, you can actually train your brain to see through your tongue. So we have blind rock climbers climbing walls that they couldn't have climbed before. We have blind people catching balls. We have they're playing tit-tat-toe with their daughters for the first time in their lives, picking up a cup, off of a table, because this image from this camera, and we've gotten it now to a point where it's really very minute. It's just basically almost like a little camera from a computer mounted on a pair of glasses, and the wire goes to the tongue device, and as you scan the area, you start picking up images on this matrix of 12 by 12 electrical diodes on this little tongue device, and so you can actually see with your tongue.
That's amazing. What's the time frame for it to be in everyday use?
Well, the two applications. The balance, we are actually already selling that in Canada and in Europe and in South America, and we're going through the final trials, the FDA trials here in the United States to make it FDA approved in the U.S. And we're hoping that'll be done by the middle of next year. So we're getting really close for the U.S. launch of it. But if you want that device for balance, you can get it in Canada.
Interesting. What about the vision part of it?
The vision still is under a lot of research. Some of the we're working on grants now. We have been working on grants in the past. We're actually working with IHMC to fine tune the use of it. So they're working with it to help us get that fine tuned, and it's a much more complex process and requires a lot more money. So we'll take it one step at a time. We think the balance has got, we can have the capital to get that into the marketplace, and then we'll start, once we get that FDA approved, then we'll start going towards the site.
Have you been able to determine, might there be other uses besides those two things somewhere down the road for this type of technology?
Well, one of the experiments that IHMC was working with Navy SEALs to be able to see it at night. Mm-hmm. In the water, and actually have the diver controlled by a remote GPS device. So you actually have a GPS hooked up to the device. They can see you on a monitoring screen because they're seeing you on GPS, and they can actually guide the diver to a location that they could never otherwise find. They put one on me, for example, put me in a swimming pool, threw a plate cover in the pool, and I found the plate cover in 5 minutes without any sight. So it's not a large learning curve, and you start going from there. Just imagine hooking up a GPS device to the blind device so that a blind person could actually program in the convenience store down the street. You could walk him down the stairs, you could turn him right, stop him at the corner, move him down the road, and he'd know exactly where he's going with no cane or dog or anything. I mean, the mind, when you start imagining what you could do with a sightless person with this device, it really gets exciting.
Did you have any technology experience prior to getting into this?
As a pilot, I think we're generally we're kind of techies.
Right.
I like to push buttons and
Right.
flip switches, and I love technology. And so when Ken Ford introduced Paul Baccarita to me, he probably suspected that I was gonna fall in love with this man, and he was actually introduced to me because my daughter has a traumatic brain injury, and Ken thought that Paul Baccarita could help look at her and assess her and give her some hope and about her future, and all that was accomplished. We became very fast friends with Dr. Baccarita, and he helped my daughter, and there's a long list of wonderful things that came out of that.
Your daughter's doing well now?
She is. She just moved to back to New York City. She was there for 2 years, and now she's back because she loves the stimulation of New York City, mm-hmm. and she gets along beautifully there.
Yeah. Talking about technology and healthcare and whatnot, you run a big company. You have a lot of employees. What are your thoughts on healthcare in this country and how we should best manage it? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I don't know the answer. I know that there are 30 some odd million people without health care. I deal with it on a business level because a lot of our people are hourly employees, and we struggle with trying to figure out how to find a solution to give them some basic coverage, catastrophic coverage type things. And so we have a product that we've been able to offer them, so that feels good. But I know there's a huge gap, that's there, and the privileged people like you and me that can go out and get coverage. We are the decision makers in many respects, and those that are more disenfranchised don't really have a voice. So I would love to see some hybrid of what's being talked about to allow people of every economic class to have coverage. I'd love to see that.
Do you think business needs to be more involved perhaps than they are, or more engaged than they are with it?
I fault myself for not being more engaged. I I think it's one of these problems where we have to step up as business people and get bigger than ourselves and bigger than our own pocketbooks and look for the greater good. I think that's where we should be.
As business people, and particularly when you go through challenging times, unfortunately, many people have been laid off, and companies have had to lay folks off. What does a leader need to be doing in this environment to keep his employees or her employees motivated?
Wow, these are good questions. You know, I see myself as a cheerleader. You know, I feel like I'm responsible for the morale of my people. You know, when I look at negative income results from the prior year, and I see how difficult it is to get financing and to do new projects, and a lot of the old formulas that worked for the last 20 or 30 years of my business career are not working today. It's very difficult sometimes as the owner, operator, leader to stay motivated. I think it's our job, though, to be optimistic, to see the brighter picture, to look at a larger scope and not what's happening right in front of us, and try to give hope to everybody around us. And I think our job is to look at these cycles and put ourselves in that context, so that the folks that are just that are looking to us for leadership realize that this is not permanent, that America is a resilient country, and that the world economy is a unified economy, and that we're all codependent on each other, and we have to go through this process to get to the next level. And I believe that. I think the Far Eastern countries need us just as much as we need them. You know, they produce, we consume, right. And that symbiotic relationship is a never-ending process. And I continue to believe that that's the fuel that is going to drive us out of this. And I think we'll always consume. And I think those that are producers are going to be consumers soon, and they are consuming already. Mm-hmm. And in that relationship of free enterprise with maybe a little bit more control than we had in the past, is going to work, and it's going to bring us out of this, and it's happening.
Julian MacQueen, thank you so very much for spending some time with us. Hope you'll come back sometime in the future.
Thank you.
And
enjoyed it.
We greatly appreciate it. Best of luck to you. And we thank you so very much for watching this edition of Conversations. And you can check us out on the web and also on Facebook. We certainly hope you'll do that. I'm Jeff Weeks. Take good care of yourself, and we'll see you next time on Conversations.